Welcome to another episode of Ruff Talk VR, a weekly podcast with in-depth game reviews, exclusive developer interviews, and the latest Oculus Quest news. We join our hosts Dscruffles and Stratus2k1 today as they spend another episode breaking down and discussing the Oculus Quest virtual reality world.
Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Monday Morning Coffee. Today we have a very special guest we're going to be speaking with. He is the director of the film that we were able to watch, Madrid Noir. So please everyone, welcome James Castillo. James, welcome.
It's my absolute pleasure.
So real quick, before we get started and into things, if you wouldn't mind explaining to people exactly who you are.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief because I don't wanna just hang for too long. So I'm originally from Spain. I was born in Madrid and I grew up in Madrid. It became a big part of the project just because I wanted to showcase the place that I grew up in. I very early on always was interested in working in the visual arts, and I was studying illustration and comic book. I kind of worked a little bit on like underground indie, like fanzine comic book stuff when I was growing up. And then early on, I moved into animation. I worked as a designer mostly for the last 10 years, both in video games and animation. In animation, mostly doing commercials. And recently, I've been working a lot in different TV shows and films. And a few years ago, I took my first steps into the VR world with a film called Melita. It came out like in 2015, I believe. And I did art direction for that. And that was my first ever sort of experience of what it was, not just to watch VR, but to create a narrative with VR as a tool and having conversations with the director of that project to sort of see how we could, use the possibilities of this new technology to tell stories in a different way. And I left that project with my brain just like fully stimulated with ideas and thoughts on what worked and what didn't work in VR. And at that time, Google Spotlights was very much at full steam, just releasing project after project with very interesting directors and very interesting takes on VR. And all of that stuff just combined into me sort of crystallizing this idea of making like a theater play type VR story. And then after years of work and finding the right people, that became Madrid Noir. So I kind of answered your question and kind of gave a little bit more context for where the project came from. I hope that's okay.
So as a director, being used to working with people in commercials and movies, I'm assuming this was a much harder route to take.
As in doing VR, well, it's the complete unknown. So it's like in commercials, like it's a lot of very fast paced work, but all the pipelines, all the stuff is just like is so known. Like everybody just understands exactly how to do things, the process of doing things. So you are there and it's intense and you're doing it, but you are safe within those constraints. Whereas in VR, you start saying, I want to make a theatrical narrative thing in VR, and you don't need. I didn't even have the understanding of the technology of the real time engine and stuff like that to even fathom how you would start making it. So in that terms, it's really hard because you have to like a lot of steps or like a lot of the pipeline that you're going to end up creating for the project is probably the first time ever anybody has ever done anything like it, like in VR, because it's such a new medium that pretty much anything that you do would be the first thing of that type that exists within the VR world. So you're going to have to make a lot of like things from scratch.
Yeah, man. I definitely called this film absolutely groundbreaking. Hey, it is,
That is, thank you. That's very humbling. Yeah.
But a film like this had to take years to make, right?
Yes. Yeah. From the original, like, as a designer, I tend to like always start with a log line but I need to have an illustration, like a drawing that crystallizes the idea a little bit more. And that first drawing that was ever done for the project, I think is from 2015 or something like that. So you can imagine like from there, then, developing the characters, the story, thinking about it. The process of making the final product took a little bit longer because we I pitched the idea to Nogos, which is the studio that made it. They're based here in London, and we did like a 5-minute little short film that it kind of has all the basic ideas of the project that would end up becoming what you guys have seen, but it still was very green in some of the, especially in the story and some of the technology that we used and stuff like that. But that short film managed to get through a couple of festivals and a couple of presentations that we did. And it got us in touch with some producers that wanted to make it into something bigger. And then Oculus came in. So there was a lot of stops through the journey. All together probably took like about 4 years. The actual production of making this project took a year and a half. We started working on January 2020, just before the pandemic started.
Oh my God. So you're talking like legitimately half a decade.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's actually one of the things I had wondered, like 45-minute movie, and you're looking at almost half a decade of solid work to put this together.
Yeah, it's surprising how, sometimes I remember like when I was studying all the people's like all big filmmakers that I admire, and you see their body of work. A lot of them make a handful of movies in their career, and you always kind of question like why is it that they're not making one after the other after the other after the other? And it is because a lot of these things, like, they take most of the time that it takes making a movie. Like 80% of it is the thinking of it, is the constantly being like troubleshooting your ideas, trying to make a story work better, trying to figure out the characters, the conflicts, how the format is going to work. There's a lot of like writing scripts, throwing them away, rewriting scripts, throwing them away, and do it again. And then once you get there, like after years of really, trying to take all the fat out, then you are left with that like very solid 45 minutes in our case of like, okay, I think with this, we can make a very interesting thing in VR. That also like, allows for a very constrained budget. Because, being our first project, we knew that we were not going to be able to find an immense, crazy budget. So we had to be very smart about what scenes we wanted in, what was strictly necessary, what for the story, and stuff like that. So, considerations that I feel sometimes like when you have all the money in the world, you just want to put everything that you ever think about. And sometimes you can end up with things that feel redundant just because, and you put things just because you can. In our case, we had to very much think very strictly about what was strictly necessary for the story to work.
All right, man. I'm going to jump to some things about something about the movie, but I don't think I'm going to give anything away by talking about it.
Don't worry.
So whose idea was all that beautiful looking scenery, the details above and beyond?
Yeah, like I always had the idea of making. So one of the things that I remember coming out from this project that I worked on years ago, thinking, and also by seeing all the VR projects, was I personally had a problem with when people were cutting from scene to scene and they were fading to black and then positioning you in a completely different location, because it always took you a few extra seconds to figure out where you were compared to the characters. And then that time that you would spend figuring out where you were disconnected from the story. So I always felt that in theater, they do something very clever, which is you are always looking at the same thing, which is the stage. But that stage could be a rooftop, it could be an interior, it could be a cityscape, it could be anything, right? And that I took it like as a direction to go with this, because I wanted to make sure that everybody could follow the story without any hesitation or any doubt, as to where to look at and stuff like that. So the idea of making it like a theater set came really early on, and my first drawings already had some of that implemented in there. But then we made a small art department that was comprised of me, Juancho Crespo, which is our art director, and Fanny, who's our production designer, and us three together. We did a trip to Madrid. We took a lot of photos. We started like doing a lot of like almost like location scouting, like going through books. We found archives of photographs of how Madrid looked like in the 1930s, and we started sort of trying to distill and sketch and figure out what locations or what buildings would be interesting to make, what would look better, and then how to create, like almost like, especially the sets in which Lola goes outside into the streets and you are seeing a more miniature-like world. To us, that was just we wanted to make sure that we could show like a long shot in a movie, right? We need to show distance, and because Lola is following her uncle, we needed to show like that they could walk through a big enough distance that you could but you could follow it really quickly. So we decided to make the world smaller so you could have a more bird's eye view of the entire set. And that led to these very, what we call the diorama-like sets, which are my favorite sets in the whole project. But all that came combining what we knew of Madrid, us living in Madrid, like we know like the specificity of it, like the way the bars look like, the way the typography of the buildings are, the way the street lights look like, all that stuff that came from our own experience. And then just taking stuff from theater and then give it our own VR twist sort of gave us that aesthetic of the locations that you were talking about.
Man, I thought the visuals were absolutely stunning. Nah, for real. I was telling Dscruffles, I'm like, look at the level of detail going on here. Absolutely above and beyond, man. Yeah, I think the only thing that was actually missing was being able to really smell the environment that you're in.
And I'll give you guys actually a lot of credit for really pushing the level of the Oculus Quest in real creative ways with like the lighting and things like that.
Oh, thank you. That's totally cheated. That was one of our like big breakthroughs. I remember with the team, because like also this comes down to in a more developer level, the Quest is quite limited as a device, right, to do certain things. Because we wanted to do something noir, we knew from the beginning, like I made I stomped my foot on the ground saying like, I need some lighting. Like I need to be able to use the light a little bit on this, because otherwise we're losing so much of the aesthetic and so much of the look. Part of the reason, like what I was going to talk about, is that part of the reason why we're making the theater sets became not just a good choice, like thematically, but also technically, is because it meant that the sets could look really well, could look very good, but they weren't very polygon heavy. So because most of them are just like planes that create the illusion of space, but they're pretty minimal. So that meant that we could create, we had some memory left to do some lighting. But the lighting, we only have one source of light that creates shadows. Everything else is done with what we call blockers, so invisible geometry that would cast shadows and would direct the light in the way that we wanted. So we could create those very graphic, sharp beams of light throughout the sets to guide the eyes of the audience to where the places that was important to look. And it looks really good. I'm very proud of it because it's all very cheeky. It's all really cheeky and very tricksty of us.
Yeah, and absolutely kind of what you said before. It's nothing against Oculus.
No, it's what it is.
It's just it's a mobile processor in the end. For a VR headset, there's only so much you can do. But instead of just having plain black lighting, it was real creative the way you guys were able to really push the levels of the Oculus.
Thanks.
No, even that main, I don't want to give anything away, and I don't think I am, but even that main start area with the light, and then most importantly, seeing that dust in it.
I know, it's those little...
Yeah, man, it was like, look at the dust. It was right after that. That's when I did the full 360 turnaround. It was like, look, it's a full set.
That's cool. Like that's the thing with VR is just adding those particles of dust is something very easy, fairly easy to do, but it comes very much at the very end of the production, right? So it's something that it was very hard to deal with coming from making animation for 2D sort of rendered CG animation stuff. Is that everything everything in Unreal looks like shit for like 90% of the time. And then at that those last few months where you are actually applying all the effects, all the shaders, all the stuff, everything starts like coming alive and really being like enhanced by 1,000. But for a very long time, a lot of those scenes were like quite poor, and we were all very worried. Like, is this going to work? Is this going to be like? Is the atmosphere going to work? And then once you put the lighting, you put the textures, you put the dust, it just all kind of comes together into this like very nice sort of flawless experience.
No, it's every level of detail with this movie, and I admit I've watched it more than once now.
Oh, that's a compliment.
No, the first time I watched it, I obviously paid attention to the storyline. The second time I watched it, I was more intrigued with paying attention to the detail. But this was a huge flex on your guys' part of what capabilities we have. But I'm curious, really, where do you think the future of all this is going?
Oh, well, that was like that's a very kind comment of you. We did had conversations early on, thinking that all the stuff in VR that we like so much, all the Google Spotlight stuff that we liked a lot, all those were experiments done to try to define a language that worked for VR, because I think that that's sort of one of the hardest things for people trying to create narratives in VR is that there's not really a blueprint, there's not really a very defined book on how to tell stories in VR. So you have to like come and really follow, trust your gut and really try to figure it out, like, what is that interesting? We wanted to make sure that we didn't just do something that was already that had been done. We wanted to make something that felt like one step ahead of what had been done a couple of years ago by the guys from Google Spotlights, or even Baobab has been also trying a lot of different things with VR. And we always felt that if we put in interaction, but we don't make it, like, we make it feel gimmicky and we don't make it part of like the engagement with the story, we would be failing the whole purpose of our, impetus to make this story, right? Like, I personally believe that in VR, if you're going to do anything in VR, interaction should be used to enhance the experience of being there. It shouldn't be something that just feels cosmetic or it feels only gimmicky, because that is the one thing that VR has that no other medium does, right? And I feel like people were afraid of doing it early on, but we're now in a point where like we are understanding enough of the medium to start making those steps into implementing interaction. And that's where, in your review in the last episode, I kind of sense that you guys sort of saw the value in what we're doing. And that I feel very, very happy that it feels like we're getting into that space. I feel for the future, I'm waiting for the people that take what we've done and then take it one step forward. I think when it comes to people telling stories in VR and being, you use the word groundbreaking, like whoever's going to break more ground than us is going to be that person that makes an even more flawless like connection between interaction and narrative using the VR as a medium. I feel games are fun and they would always have their space in the platform. That's never going to go away. But I think for anybody else trying to just do things that are more narrative, don't shy away from doing interaction, like use it, because it creates something so much more unique than what you can do in a movie or in a theater play. Like, you guys are an example of people that actually got through the story and really, really liked it. But I was traveling through Spain a couple months ago, showing it to people and going to different places. And the most exciting thing was just seeing people talk back to Lola when she's talking to them, because it's something that I know comes from a very almost primitive part of their brain, because we make the character look at you in the eye and she asks you for things, and it creates this very innate, very normal social like connection with the character that you would never get in a normal video game or in a movie or in a theater play. And that helps elevate the entire experience.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had an attachment per se to a video game character. Characters I like, characters I didn't, but definitely not an overall attachment. This movie, I got some pretty big attachment. Yeah, I think we said it during the review. This is just a movie you have to watch. If you're an adult, you're gonna get the content of this movie. It's more than just graphics. There's a compelling story that takes place, and I even admitted it, and I still do. It kind of made me emotional.
And yeah, this is something I mentioned during the podcast review too. It's like I'm a big fan of literature and story development, and it's not often that these kind of animated tales are able to really get me invested in these characters. So to be able to do that in 45 minutes, I mean, in an animated movie,
yeah,
that's
I'm
not
blushing.
easy. So yeah, it was more than just these like stunning visuals and nice musical score and lighting. You know, beyond that, even just the script and the storyline was amazing.
Oh my god!
And yeah, this was actually something I even said during our podcast review. Again, it's not that the first half or the first part was bad or anything, but it's like, you know, I finished the first part. I was like, all right, this is good. But, you know, that moment I was in the second half from the get-go, I was like, oh, yeah, now I'm really feeling this.
That's amazing.
So
That's
hats off.
Yeah.
I mean,
Lawrence.
Sorry.
Sorry. Please carry on.
No, that was entirely my fault. No, yeah. So in case like any of our listeners at home happen to have not seen the movie yet, you know, we keep going on the visuals. It's not just this visual masterpiece at all. You know, it's very well written as well.
Oh my god, that's like Lawrence, Lawrence and Lydia, who are the co-writers on this, are gonna really love that you guys are saying this. It is something that we, you know, like to some degree, maybe like we were a little bit obsessive about the story because we knew that, again, like we, you know, looking back at how this story came together, like we are all pretty young. You know, No-Gos had been working for like maybe like 3 or 4 years at that point. I was just sort of like coming into the industry, and we wanted to prove a lot of things. And so we spent a lot of time really questioning and really thinking about what would make, you know, this story interesting. And I think one of the things that came in a lucky way was when we were trying to figure out the whole idea of this is not a spoiler, but the idea of the timelines. And having these two perspectives on the same character, we realized that it was tricky plot wise and sort of timing wise and pacing wise, but it allowed us to really speed up the emotional process, because if you when you meet Lola the first time, you have no context to know who she is or what she's like or what she wants, and she says you know, certain things that could feel a little bit flat or could feel a little bit sort of like unrelated to anything. And then once you've gone through what she went through as a little girl, and then you see her back, all of a sudden you just want to give her a hug, because you know exactly, you know, you've almost lived in first person what she went through. And it creates this attachment that allows you in 20 minutes to go much faster than you would in a book or in a movie, because that's the beauty of real time, is that when you see in a movie, because it's framed and because it's very stylized, it kind of feels like you're watching the recording of something that already happened. Whereas in VR, because you are there in the space with a person, it feels like you are seeing the succession of events in real time, and you're being a witness to something that's happening in real time. And that's something that just allows this emotional connection to happen much faster. But again, this is something that we were not aware of, like from the get-go. It's something that we realized or we discovered as we were doing it. So again, it's one of these things that when you're starting to create things in VR, there's so much that you have to discover and you have to learn through the process, and you have to realize what are the benefits of doing it like that. From the writing perspective, like we put a lot of work into understanding also like how you write a mystery, because it's one of those things that also from a very plot point of view has its own rules, and it took us a long time to, like, you know, you almost have to start writing the story not really knowing exactly what maybe the mystery is, and then once you've laid out the mystery, how can I explain this? It's almost like for a long time, for example, Manolo was the main character, and it was much more focused on the uncle, right? We were writing the story, and we realized that it was much more interesting to look at the story from the perspective of the little girl, because she's the one that doesn't know stuff, right? And for her, everything is like this new world that she's walking into, and it's much more relatable that way. And it also allowed us to create a sense of discovery, right? So it took us to figure out the entire plot of Manolo. We even wrote everything that was happening before Lola arrived to Madrid, everything that happened to Manolo, all the dialogue that you never hear, all the stuff that happens, just so then we could take 20% of what we wrote and then show it from the perspective of the little girl. So those are a lot of the things that, again, like it's all on the writing, and it's very much on the writing from a very classical perspective. Like it's sometimes very easy to, like I said before, get lost on the fact that you can do anything you want in VR, but the story is king, especially in projects like this. So it took us most of the time, like I was saying before, like 80% of the time in development was mostly just getting the story to work, because that gave us a lot of answers as well in terms of design and lighting and all these things. Because if you don't know what the purpose of a scene is, things like the lighting is going to feel very flat, because you are not really utilizing it. Utilizing it. Utilizing it, is that how you say it?
Yeah.
Using it, I guess. Using it in the most effective way, right? So thank you for noticing. But yeah, it was like a lot of the work and a lot of the stress was like shouldered on the script.
So let me ask you, when this was put together, and I guess everybody involved, was the intent to actually get the emotion out of people like that? Well, I mean, for real. I mean, this movie really will grip you and get you emotional.
It was the intent to, like, once Lola became, it's like at one point, like we wanted to do something very genre specific, right? Especially early on in my case, like I was like, my favorite part is all the black and white. Well, it's not really a spoiler. Anyway, the ending part. I'm not going to say anything else.
Yeah, it's hard to give these things without spoilers.
Yeah, but that's my favorite part, right? Because it's that like much more specific, like noir police thing, very movie like character type of stuff. But once we started like developing the character Lola, we knew that she couldn't just be a vehicle for us to show all the cool, fun adventure stuff. She needed to have her own parallel journey and her own learning to do. And we needed to find a closure to that at the end. And we knew that because the relationship with Manolo is so conflicted and touching, it was going to become an emotional ending. Like, no matter, like, if we were honest about what her proper ending would be, we knew that we had to go for a very emotional ending. I think there were discussions of making a much more adventurous ending, where, like, I'm not going to say anything else, but like where she does something a little bit more dramatic, or she does something a little bit more maybe adventurous or even violent. At one point, we were thinking like she could take over part of the case that was never unsolved, and she would go into like it would be almost like a revenge story type of thing. But we kind of realized really quickly that was just distracting us from the much more core emotional part of the character, that was that connection with her uncle. And I think once we accepted that and we were honest about that, and that I gotta credit Lydia, one of all the writers, with like really helping us develop what like all the Lola story would be. But once that, we knew that and we were honest about that, it was all about, okay, if we're gonna go emotional, let's try to hammer as much as we can this like emotional element of it. And that's what, like, that ending, like you said before, like the idea of like the first episode is the one that has to happen in order to go through the second one and really get the payback from all the stuff that you've seen, right? So we knew that, for like, one thing that we did intentionally is that because the second episode is very heavy on resolution and the emotional aspect is very important, and we need to focus to allow you to focus on the character very much. We don't want you to get too distracted. We put much more interaction in the first episode, just so it would feel more like, dynamic and fun, and it was more like adventurous. And then the payoff to that, or in a way, the price of going through that very dynamic first episode, is to then just go to the second one and really get that emotional payback from the story.
Well, again, hats off to the entire team, because to be able to get that kind of emotion out of anybody in that kind of time frame, and I know we've said it before, is absolutely incredible.
Including for myself, you know. Yeah, I'm usually not that.
I'm very touched by that, by these guys. Like we were all in the studio very touched by the fact that you guys really liked it so much.
Well, I mean, that's just the reality. I can probably count the number of movies that have even gotten some sort of emotional reaction out of me, and this movie was definitely able to do that.
Aw.
I know it's true because Dscruffles even admitted it.
No, I'm usually not that guy at all. So little bit of a left field question here.
Don't worry.
So how many people are involved in a VR film project like this? I know there's No Ghost, the people you partnered with. But you know, how big is a project like this? Past interviews we've had developers, we hear like 4 people teams, like quite a bit. I wasn't sure if it's the same thing with film.
No, this is no. Like we okay, so it was me and No Ghost for a very long time, right? With developing the project. Then Atlas 5, which is our producer company that is in France, they are the ones that helped us get financing. They also, you know, I would say between No Ghost and me, 6. They brought in a couple of the people. Then, because we knew that we needed to do like a lot of keyframe animation, we needed like a big, hefty team of animators. So that was, I think, 6 people. It was 1 animation director and 5 animators. Then, so that's, yeah. Then we had an art department of 3. We had a CG department of another 5 or 6 people. We had sound design, 2 different teams. The music guy with the music. Like, I think we did a calculation at the highest point. It was 45 people, 40 people, more or less. And then, but the core team for the longest amount of time stayed at around 12 people, more or less, like sort of in and out, different departments. And then as the production started getting to the end of it, it was just a team of about 6 or 7 that we were the ones that really were shouldering all the ending process to really get it to the finish line. But yeah, it was about 40 people at the very highest. Because and most of it is just in terms of the developers, it was really 3 people. So there was 1 guy that was doing all the coding, all the engine optimization stuff. We had 1 guy that was doing all the interaction, and then 1 guy that was doing all the look dev. And that's already 3. That's it. And then everything else was just teams of, we did it's just thousands and thousands of frames of animation that have to be perfectly timed and connected and all the stuff. So that took a lot of people, a lot of time. And then all the art, like you guys were saying that you were appreciating the design of the locations, like every ball of like wrap paper, every sort of what's the word, like killed cigarette that's in the floor, every leaf, every bench, everything is like somebody has to go in and like by hand. Another case, it was me or my friend Juancho just like by hand, just going in and painting it and writing it by hand and doing all the postcards. Like all the stuff is done by somebody has done it. Every book cover, everything. So yeah, it was a lot of people.
No, that's really incredible. So this is a question that we usually like to ask our guests for the interviews, and it's not something we've touched at all yet. So what was your first ever experience in virtual reality?
Oh.
Yeah, was it like a game? Was it studying? Was it film? What was your first ever virtual reality experience?
Yeah, it was. So like I said, when I was on that project Melita, I walked into the studio. This is back in Madrid years ago. I think they had the DK, I believe the DK2 at that point, 2015. What would you get? Would you get or DK1? I guess maybe. I don't know. I think it was one of those like early Oculus like Rift with like 100 cables coming out of it. And I walked in and they showed me a few things. The one thing that really caught my eye was the Tilt Brush. Was that like the drawing app that you have to draw in VR? It was fun, but it always felt like a very gimmicky thing. It wasn't until I saw Pearl, which is one of the Google Spotlight projects in VR, that I really had to take a step back and be like, that was unlike anything I've ever seen. That is fucking cool. yeah, that was one of those like at that point I was convinced that, I was convinced like within 3 years everyone is going to be doing VR like all the time. We're still not there, but it's just slowly getting to a point where like I'm happy now that I can, like, some of my friends that are not necessarily gamers or like super heavy techie people are starting to get headsets, and it's starting to become less weird to have a Quest in your home. And I think slowly there's going to be a bigger and bigger audience to see this type of stuff.
No, I agree completely. I think something that's going to be huge in getting to the mainstream is something like an Oculus Quest 2.
Yeah.
I think for most people, just like yourself, you saw VR in 2015, 2016, and, your mind exploded. You were like, oh my God, it's only 1-2 years away before how could this not be, in everybody's hands and just completely everywhere? But then you look in, cost preventative things like, gaming computer costs, $800. Then you need to get the $800 headset from there. I don't think it would ever become, more than just a couple people playing it. Versus you have something like Oculus Quest 2, it's $300-$400.
Man, the Quest is like,
yeah, that's the future. That's what's going to be mainstream.
Yeah, well, like one thing I'll say is like it's all changing really fast. Like when we started making Madrid Noir, the Quest didn't the Quest 1 had just come out and the Quest 2 was still not out. So since we started, and when we did the short film 4 years ago, the Quest wasn't even a thing. Like I remember when the first untethered headset came out was that the Vive Focus, I think it was called, right? I was like, this is the future. And then a year later, you had the Quest 1 and then the Quest 2. And so what I'm saying is that in the last 4 years, like the leaps in technology that are happening with the headsets are immense. Like the idea that you can just go with a Quest 2. I mean, this is not, I wanted to turn into like an advertising for the Quest 2, but it is really impressive what you can do with it. Like that you can just, with the Link, connect to your computer and then be able to play like things from Steam with it. And it's just this seamless transition. It's so easy and much more affordable. So I think like now is when that's what I was saying. Like I'm seeing now people, friends of mine that have nothing to do with this world, really starting to be interested in VR as a fun thing to do and to connect with friends. And yeah, like I agree with you. I think part of the problem is that is only games. Like most people that I've convinced to buy a headset is not because of the games. It's because of all the stories, the documentaries, the 360 videos, all those like more immersive experimental stuff. Because that's really what's going to bring a new audience to headsets. Because gamers would always come to, like gamers, you don't even have to convince them to come into VR. It's all the other people, and you want this to be as mainstream as possible, right? Because it shouldn't just be a vehicle for shooter games. It should be a vehicle for culture of all kinds.
So because of this movie and the attention that it's getting and righteously deserves, do you think that more people, or do you feel like more people are reaching out to you who might want to be going down the same path?
Into VR? Well, there's definitely interest everywhere. Like down from the festivals, like the film festivals are starting to, pretty much every festival at this point has a section on VR. They all want to talk about it. They all want to highlight it. It is almost always every studio has some sort of interactive division that has somewhat of an interest in VR. So yeah, there's definitely interest. There's definitely people paying attention. The one thing that it is true though is that very few people have gone through the process of directing something in VR. So as much as companies and studios want to go that route, it still is going to take a few years for the talent to be there, ready to have the experience to tell things in VR, to use VR in a way that is, that makes sense to use it that way.
So this opens up the door for a whole new form for directors then.
I think so.
Yeah, it's kind of what I'm thinking, because you're kind of taking the whole people element out of it.
What do you mean?
Yeah, kind of like because you're using your mental creativity and that aspect of things, other than just that, working with the human being side.
Right. Yeah. So yeah. In that regard, it's like that weird hybrid between directing a video game and directing an animated movie is this weird thing that you have to have somewhat of experience in both worlds to be able to do something in VR that utilizes the technology properly. I think that's my own personal opinion by them. Anyway.
So to get back to asking questions directly related to the movie, one of the things I loved, and whose idea was it to make a lot of the narrative characters silent? And I don't really think that's a spoiler or anything.
Oh no.
I think that that's something that for me actually helped me get more attached to a lot of the characters, and really helped speed up the time. Whereas usually you would need a whole 2.5 hour movie to really get that kind of attachment with characters. I was able to get that attachment with the silent characters in 45 minutes, and I think that the fact that it was silent with those characters in dialogue is what really helped me grow attached to them so fast.
Well, that was something that came from really early on when we were starting to think about that, that short film that we did that we call the prologue. It's the idea there was to make something much more inspired by like the Pink Panther type of things, like a very slapstick, very silent cinema, little chase, and just make it something like very cartoony, very short. We always intended to do something that was like a 10-minute little short film. And then once we scaled up and we make it this much bigger project, we wanted to keep some of those elements that for us were like thematically important for the look of the project, right? And to utilize the music and the theater aspect of it. If we were to have like characters giving up monologues and stuff like that, it would just it would make the movement of the story much slower, and it would also be much more expensive to make. But that wasn't really the reason. Like the reason was because originally we always imagined all this stuff as like very much inspired by like Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin type of stuff, like very pantomime driven, very much like physical, storytelling and comedy. And then the idea of the narrator came as a narrative device to just be able to not so much tell you what's going on, but to tell you the way she felt, because we wanted to really hammer down those like emotional cues, right? But like even when the action starts and she goes out, the narration stops because there's nothing to say there. You're seeing it. There's no need to. We even tested with the idea of like having more VO in some of those scenes, and it just felt like redundant. Like you have two things telling you the same thing. Like, just take the voice out and let the visuals to speak for themselves.
Hey, well, I think when it all came together in the end, it came out great, my friend.
Thanks, man.
No problem. So are you all done with VR now? Was this a one-time VR project? I know it's a little abrupt of a question.
Yeah.
But do you see yourself going back into like regular animation, or was this something that now VR is going to be your focus as a director? I'm not against the idea of doing more VR at all. I like it a lot. I think we actually have like some ideas of some smaller projects that we want to do. We want to do something a little bit smaller because we want to experiment a little bit more. Because on this one, as much as we did a lot of like, breakthroughs with the pipeline and the way we worked, we were under the pressure of having to make something that had to work and come out in a specific platform, specific date. We want to do something a little bit smaller, so the pressure is a little bit less to experiment with some ideas on how to do narrative in VR. But at the moment, like the stuff that I'm developing now, it's again like the lesson that I was talking about before. It's all about the story, right? If the stories that I'm developing and I'm writing, I feel that they would benefit from being told in VR, then I would go that route. But I'm much more driven by the story than I am by the tech necessarily. But again, like I've done it. I know how to do it. I know the power that it has. So I'm perfectly open to, if an opportunity comes in to tell an interesting story in VR, there's no reason why I wouldn't say yes. Totally.
I was actually hoping for more of the Madrid Noir.
Yeah, more of that Madrid universe. I loved it.
Well, I can't promise anything. We've thought about what would it take for us to make more VR stuff, more Madrid Noir stuff. Sorry. So let's see how it goes. I mean, it just came out like, a few weeks ago. So we'll give it a little bit of time. And then depending on how it goes, we will have conversations to maybe make more or see where it can grow. But definitely these characters, we really love them. We really like them. And we have ideas on what to do. But it would depend more on sort of if we see that it finds an audience, that will do more of it.
I hope the popularity kicks off where I can actually get a little action figure or something.
That'd be so nice, man.
Yeah, man, especially because your sets are like diorama anyways.
Yeah, right? Oh my God, that was...
Yeah.
Oh, that would be a dream.
Yeah, you could have Madrid Noir right on your tabletop.
To do a little table game, like a little board game with little dioramas of buildings and walking around and chasing one another. Oh, that'd be so fun. That'd be so fun.
One thing I didn't get to talk about was the sound score that you used for this movie.
On what again? The sound?
Yeah, the actual sound. Like who was that about?
Oh, the music is like. Thank you guys for pointing that out because yeah, I want to use every opportunity I have to compliment Carlos Rodriguez, who is our composer, to make. So in the 30s in Spain, it still exists, but it's not as popular as it was then. But there was this very specific type of theater, musical type of stuff that happens in Spain called zarzuela. And it has that, like, a lot of our soundtrack is like mixing that like old-fashioned like Madrid music with a little bit of jazz and that noir aesthetic. I like, we in the team, we were all like, every time he would send us a track of music, everybody was like losing their minds because it's like, this is so fucking good. This is like way beyond what we expected. We were very, very happy with it. Yeah.
No, yeah. For me, that was a big part of growing my attachment with all these characters, was that sound score. I think that...
Yeah, I'll let Carlos know.
Yeah, no, that was amazing. I think a big reason that we're so harping on, like, we don't want it to end is because, at the end of the movie, we both had the same reaction where the scene ends and we both just scream, no! Like, we wanted more content because of how good it was. So I think that's why, me and Stratus over here keep harping on, is there going to be more of the Lola story who, like you said, maybe in the beginning she fell a little bit flat on people like myself, but like by the end, my opinions on a lot of these characters, it was a complete 180. So, I think that's why we're so big on it.
Yeah, we have like a lot. I don't want to go too much into spoilers, but there's that bad guy. Not the really bad guy, the other one.
No, that's a little bit of a spoiler.
Yeah, I know, but he has like we have a lot of ideas for him, but yeah, again, like if anybody comes knocking down our door and says like, hey, we want you guys to do more Madrid Noir, we have a whole chest of ideas. We'll be like, great, let's get something out of here and just do something with it. But for now, the powers that be have to like, see it as a valuable option, but we're ready.
I do love the reference you made to the Pink Panther, though. It definitely has that kind of feel to it.
Oh, nice.
And, to be honest with you, I think the only thing that's really stopped this movie from picking up a lot of steam is the fact that, besides what you said, that it's only been out for like, 3 weeks?
Yeah.
It's also the fact that I think that there's a subset of virtual reality gamers that anything that's not like their definition of a virtual reality game, they don't want.
Yeah. Yeah. That's something that was our experience. Like it has been in the last few weeks. Like we realized that it's pretty much split. Like people either absolutely love it, or they feel that they have been weirdly cheated, even though we never said that it wasn't a movie. But yeah, like I agree. I think it's just there's still an idea out there of a lot of people that think that or like they have a very strict idea of what VR should be used for, and anything that challenges that, it gets a little bit of rejection. I personally I'm confident that it will find the audience, and I think like it will be totally fine.
Yeah, I hope it all stays positive. I mean, the only thing I think I ever read was somebody that was just complaining that they didn't feel that it was actually interactive enough.
Yeah, but again, like,
but the thing is, like, how much interaction do you even want?
And it's not even...
It's not a video game in the end.
Yeah, and it's not even like that, to be honest. Like, I was mentioning it, but it's not like it's keeping us awake, and like it's like taking us. It's like, look, we've done something that we really believe in. We're really proud of it. We know we are 100% sure that it has an audience because we've already seen it. We've seen people like really, you guys are an example of it. There's a lot of other people like, in festivals, in Tribeca and in Sundance, and in Sundance, in Cannes and in Annecy and all these places. When I was in Madrid, everybody that saw it like was really connected to it. So we know that is there. It's just, it feels that the VR community is kind of split into the people that are enthusiastic about it and make it and really want to see all the new experimental stuff. And then there's people that just want to play their VR games and they don't see the value on stuff that feels a little bit more maybe, artistic, for the lack of a better word. But I'm sure that would slowly sort of, become much more sort of the norm.
Yeah, this is actually something I even encountered beyond just the games and experiences thing of virtual reality. I noticed that there's kind of this old guard of PC VR. When I first got my Quest, I hopped on like the subreddits for the Oculus Quest and for virtual reality. And I noticed that there was this large subset of people who, they had been doing virtual reality since it, first started coming out 2015, 2016. And anything that was, Oculus mobile processor, Oculus exclusive, it was instantly shunned as anti-Facebook and, mobile processor, weak graphics, kids games. And there was a lot of hate going towards, anything that didn't fit their definition of what virtual reality should be. So there's a little bit of even elitist mentality with just PC VR versus Oculus Quest.
Yeah, they're gatekeepers, right? Like they want to keep it like what they thought it was their own unique thing. I think like, but the numbers speak to like, dude, like there are more Quest 2 than there are any other headset. So if anybody coming in, they just can't ignore making stuff for the Quest 2 because that's where most of their audience is going to come from. So that's what it is.
And like, exactly, yeah, you can be upset at it, but, without something like this, PC VR is forever going to stay at, 5,000 users. Very small niche. And I get it. It's its own thing and everything like that. But if we're ever really going to see VR break into the masses, it's going to take something like the Quest 2.
Absolutely. 100%.
So I'd like to see really the VR community get more open to embracing, a lot of these new headsets, games, experiences, even if they're not as powerful as some of the PC VR alternatives, just because if we ever want to see VR grow, we're all really going to need to embrace this stuff together.
100%, man. This is amen. Totally.
Yeah, I think people also need to actually read descriptions when they buy something.
Yeah,
No. Yeah, most of the reviews I've read from people who are angry, it was pretty obvious that they never read it before they bought it.
Yeah.
You see that a lot with these. It's like people kind of buy it and then go back later and then drop a review.
Yeah, nowhere was it ever mentioned that, this was a video game.
Yeah, no.
And yeah, nowhere does it say you're going to get up and jump around and move around a whole bunch, you know? It was actually something that I had said during the review that, the spots that it has you interact actually make sense. It's like, how much interaction do you want? It's a movie, not a game.
Yeah. Well, that was something that we wanted to like be very mindful of that is that, like I was saying before, like it should never feel gimmicky. Like they have to feel like they are somehow furthering a concept for the story or they are helping you understand Lola better. Like, I'm not going to do a spoiler because you can see in the trailer, but there's a moment where you pick up the camera, right? And you're taking photos of Manolo outside. The idea there is not just to put something because we can't do it, is to further the idea that, as an audience, Lola is not just telling you that Manolo was doing things that were suspicious, is that you're actually seeing how Manolo was doing suspicious things. So when she tells you, you're like, yeah, I saw what you're talking about. So I now believe you even more. I'm grounded into what you're saying. And those are sort of things like why we were discussing about like the interaction is that it has to have a reason why you're doing it. Otherwise, don't add it. So yeah, I'm glad that you guys appreciate it. Like if you guys can appreciate it, anybody can. Like it's just, that's the thing. That's what gives me hope. I hope that doesn't come across like wrong, but it's the idea that, you guys are gamers. I'm a gamer. I'm like, I play it to my friends that are gamers and use VR and they see it and they're like, this has value. This is interesting. This is something that should be out there. So I think like, it's just a matter of time. that just gets there.
Yeah, no, this is one of those that if you can just get somebody in front of it and have them sit through it, I think that there's no way that they aren't sold on it completely. This is something that we both talked about that, both me and Stratus here, we need to ourselves be more open-minded to trying new experiences and stuff like that, because you look at something like this, we finish it and we're just, wow.
That's good.
So yeah, no, definitely we need to be more open-minded ourselves. But I could definitely see how somebody else would have that same mentality. So I think that's why we're good people to hear this from, because it's like, hey, this isn't our first pick for a VR experience either. And we finish it and, we're leaving it going, this is something we need to explore more of. That's been really one of the biggest wow moments in VR for me, is pretty much everything that I liked outside of VR with console gaming and PC gaming did not apply at all the second I came over to virtual reality. Any genre I liked, any preconceived notions I had on what I liked, all went out the window the second I put a headset on. Like, usually I hate shooters, but in VR, I just find them absolutely mind-numbingly fun.
I know. It's a whole other thing. I was recently playing this game called Demio. Is it called Demio?
Yep, it's Demio.
That tabletop game?
Oh, yeah.
It's so fun. Like, it was, I'll tell you what, I played it with some friends. I was like, this is one of the first things that I actually do in VR that fulfills that promise of hanging out with your friends, playing this one game and being able to chat and play and have a good time, everybody in their headsets. It was the funnest thing. It was so great. And it was I don't get that social aspect from playing in my own PC with my games. I play some games on my PC, but I never play socially, with my headset and just playing shooting games. But in that case, it's this is some of the most interesting social / gaming experiences that I've ever had. And again, it's VR.
Yeah, it's an experience, and I'm just happy it's being pushed in the right direction.
So let me ask you, for Demio, who's your favorite character to use?
They're curious. Okay, I've been mostly using the Paladin and the Assassin.
Yeah, that's actually funny. I usually use the Guardian Paladin and Stratus over here.
The Archer.
Right.
Except, on this new Rat King map, we seem to both be going with Guardian for a little bit more success.
I haven't finished it. I haven't been able to finish it yet.
Yeah, no, us either. Except, in fairness, we've been stuck on the last few weeks on a Township Tale.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, that's a good new one. But no, this new map, man, that first one wasn't too bad. But the second one, oh, dude.
Yeah. I'm supposed to try to finish it tonight with some friends, so I'll update you if we finish it.
Yeah, I've yet to talk to anybody that's finished that map yet.
I've been reading about some people beating it. It seems they fixed that issue with the arrows going all the way through the walls. But yeah, last time we played, we spent, a 3.5 hour session, made it all the way to the 3rd floor with the boss, just to lose after 3.5 hours.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, and on the 2nd floor, we spent, 30, 40 minutes just stuck in a corner, just murking nonstop waves of enemies. We eventually got out, but, shit, in the end, we ended up losing to the queen anyway.
Brutal. Yeah.
So, good luck tonight with your friends, because if you can beat it, hats off to you. So, were you into tabletop board games before Demio, or is that your first endeavor?
Yeah, I've always liked tabletop games. I have a couple of friends that publish them and make them, and yeah, that's the thing. And that's where VR is interesting, because it's very non-threatening. I think that's really even my girlfriend is playing some VR games here and there, because I think this idea with gaming and the idea of big consoles, or computers and PCs and stuff like that is quite there's quite a bit of a blockage at the beginning, or the entry is quite threatening. Whereas the VR is really welcoming, because it's so intuitive. It's just there's no controllers to use. It's just so easy to just move your way around. So it's very inviting. I really like all the stuff that I like outside of VR. I can find it in VR, and I really enjoy exploring it.
Yeah, it's definitely a welcome part of the future. And I mean, don't get it wrong, I'm a little older, so I remember when video games started back in my day, when they were literally just a square block, and that was supposed to be a circle. So
yeah.
And now to be able to be in an open world 360 degree environment,
it's
just
pretty
amazing.
Crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even in a 360,
absolutely.
Even in a 360 movie theater too. That's the next.
Come
level.
on, yeah, man. I played it too. I played Madrid Noir to my mom and my aunt and people like that, and their reaction is the most earnest you can put. Like when somebody that hasn't had any gaming experience in their life and they go into a headset, just their reaction is like it's so crazy. It's almost like giving them acid for the first time or something like that. It's like this crazy trip and you see them in their faces, in their like they get emotional in VR because it's such a, again, I feel like that. Like when people that have done VR are talking about VR to people that don't know about VR, it feels like we're a bunch of druggies just talking about drugs to people that don't take drugs, because it's so hard to explain. It's like a mind-altering experience. It completely changes the way you perceive space and time. Like Madrid Noir is 45 minutes. Most people think they've been in it for like 10.
No, actually, I agree with that a lot.
Yeah.
The time that I was in there didn't feel like 45 minutes at all.
This is crazy.
Yeah, although I will admit, I think I definitely did extend my viewing time a little bit past 45 minutes by the amount I was playing with everything in the beginning, in that opening scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, without giving too much spoilers,
Yeah, it's made for that, man. It's made for that. That's totally fine. That's the point.
So, Stratus, do you have anything else that you want to ask our guest here before we wrap things up and go too far down the Demio rabbit hole? Since, we've already spent, so much time talking about that. Yeah, that was actually our first episode was Demio. Then we just did a review of that new DLC.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think definitely our viewers could take a little Demio break versus hearing us talk about it for another 2 to 3 hours, which we will very easily do.
I just hope people are receptive to this and sharing it with their friends. I mean, I know if I have someone come over, I'm 100% going to have them watch it.
Amazing.
I just hope there's another movie in the works.
Yeah. Well, you guys will be the first to know.
Ooh, that's exactly what I like to hear.
No, I had a lot of excitement for this interview, so I'm sad to see it kind of wrap up.
Oh, well, thank you so much, guys, for being so supportive of the project and really wanting to people to see it. And this is very sweet, and it makes us feel much more welcome by the community. It's really nice. Thank you so much.
No, huge thank you to everyone involved, everyone who had any part with it, even the person who might have run and gotten a coffee for everyone.
The sound guys, the lighting guys, everybody involved in the different little elements of this movie. All of those things together is really what made this thing such a masterpiece, in my opinion. So really hats off to everybody involved in this.
No, I was making the Pixar comparisons. I mean, if you had told me that Pixar put their name on this, I 100% would have believed it.
Yeah, that was very, very flattering. We're all big fans of Pixar.
No, there was something about the shading, or I don't know, the glare, the shine, something specifically about the eyes. I remember telling Dscruffles, hey man, when you look at this, really, you got to check out those eyes.
Flap, the CG guy is gonna be very happy about those because we worked really hard on those highlights, and he really burst his brain to make them. I was like, we need highlights because otherwise you just don't connect to the character the same way. And he delivered, and this is a testament that it's important to have highlights on eyes.
No, and I was a big fan of a lot of the artwork, like the wide, big, exaggerated chest, the super wide hips with the thin waist.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I love that style of artwork. Something about it,
nice.
It makes it weirdly more immersive for me.
So, I mean, is there anything really even bad to say about it?
No, that was actually something that we talked about on the podcast a lot. That's usually the format of our episodes. We do our pros, our cons, what we like, disliked, maybe some different things we would add to it. I got to it and I was like, well, what do we say we dislike?
Oh, guys, thank you so much.
So yeah, James, thank you again so much for your time here today.
Guys, my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for giving us this little space to talk about the project. Thank you so much.
Oh yeah, definitely like to keep in touch and have you on the show again.
Absolutely.
So yeah, for any of our listeners who have still yet to watch Madrid Noir on the official Oculus Quest store, man, I say get on that. Get that on your headset. Keep it on your headset for when you get grandma over, friend. It's a great first VR experience to really show somebody the capabilities of virtual reality.
Yeah. Thank you so much, guys.
And for our listeners at home, I hope you guys all have a great rest of your day. If you enjoyed today's episode, then be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Also, if you're feeling real generous, you can even give us a 5-star review. Don't forget as well to check out our official subreddit at www.reddit.com/r/RuffTalkVR. There you can join other fans of the podcast, get sneak peeks of next week's episode, and even talk with our host directly. Also, any sponsorship inquiries and guest requests can be sent directly to our email at rufftalkvr@gmail.com. Stay tuned for next week's episode, and have a great day.